In 1984, Michael Jackson was regarded as the most famous human being to live on planet Earth. Thriller had sold over 30 million copies and was continuing to sell millions per week. The album that would eventually become the best-selling record in history was actively in the process of becoming just that, while he himself was still alive and around to watch it happen. He had just debuted his moonwalk on national television, making it so phenomenal and memorable, and he had just changed what a music video could even be considered as now. He was only 25 years old, and there was no ceiling visible from where he was standing. And that summer, the summer of the debut of Thriller, his father made him go on tour with his brothers. Now, the band, known as the Jackson 5, held their tour known as the Victory Tour. It was in stadiums, and it was the reunion of the Jackson 5 that nobody in the group particularly wanted, but their father actually chose for them to have. He decided that it was happening instead of asking for it to happen. Now, Michael Jackson had reportedly tried to get out of it. He had given the entirety of his share of the proceeds, which was allegedly around $5 million, to charity even before the tour started, as if he was trying to divest himself from something that he was unable to refuse but also wanted no part of. He went regardless of the fact. He performed anyway, and he even outperformed absolutely everyone on that stage every single show, every single night, because he simply could not help it. And that image, in my opinion, the most talented person in the world on a stage that he never chose and willingly hated, as a matter of fact, giving everything he had away every single night, is the whole Michael Jackson story in one singular frame. What Michael Jackson actually was, technically, is still not fully understood by most people who invoke his name today. It was the voice first. He had been a lead vocalist since he was only 6 years old, and by the time Thriller was recorded, he had developed an instrument of extraordinary range and control, beyond so many other people even possible. You know, the falsetto, or the grunt, or his hee-hee, his most famous hee-hee. It was things like his whispered intimacy of a lyric like human nature sitting right beside the controlled ferocity of his song Wanna Be Starting Something. And these performances were not accidents in any sense. They were the result of a person who had been studying and developing and practicing and refining that instrument since before most children are even at the age to start reading. Then came his dancing, another huge part of his act, another really distinguishable thing about him. Fred Astaire called him the morning after his Motown 25 performance, which was his moonwalk debut on national TV, and told him it was the greatest dancing he had ever seen in his life. Gene Kelly said the exact same thing as well, and these weren't polite compliments from old men or famous people being gracious, but instead were two of the greatest dancers in the history of American performance, recognizing something that they understood they were completely incapable of doing. Now, the moonwalk wasn't invented by Michael Jackson per se, but what he did was take a technique that existed in street dance and hip-hop circles and refined it to such a level of precision yet fluidity that nobody before or even since till today has matched it yet. He practiced for months and months and years on end. He wore just a specific type of shoe, able to create that illusion, and every single detail was considered by Michael himself. Nothing in that sense was accidental, and if you've caught on by now, all of his talents, all of his most regarded, most influential talents were never done by accident. They all had so much detail behind them. For instance, you can think of his production levels. Projects like Off the Wall or Thriller or Bad, all of those are not simply commercially successful albums. What they are structurally extraordinary pieces of work. They are beyond human comprehension in a sense. They have such refined sequencing, they have incredible arrangements and sonic architectures building up everything behind it. You know, the way that he and Quincy Jones built worlds inside of individual tracks was genuinely beyond anything that anyone nowadays could create, in my opinion. Songs like Billie Jean or Don't Stop Till You Get Enough or Beat It, all of those are such recognizable pieces of art because they have such intricacy built into the music itself. And these songs, they hold up not just because of the nostalgia, but genuinely because of the craft, because of the beauty behind them. And by any serious measure, by anyone, or by even general public regards, he was one of the most complete entertainers, if not the most complete entertainer in the history of recorded music. And he was then eaten alive by the culture instead of corroborated. Not in a metaphorical sense either, literally. The scale of the attention which was directed at him from the mid-80s onwards was something that no human psychology was ever built to withstand. He physically could not go outside without that becoming a story or a newsletter that day, and could not have a conversation with a stranger without that conversation again becoming a story. He couldn't make any decisions about his life, for instance his appearance with his vitiligo or his nose job, or his relationships, for instance with his multiple wives, or his home or his children or his pets or anything, without that decision being consumed and then judged and then turned into content by a media apparatus that decided Michael Jackson was their public property. It is completely parasocial, and that is the exact thing that caused such mental distress on that man. And what happened to him was he ended up retreating due to that pressure, due to that overwhelmed emotional sense. Neverland, the isolation that looked like from the outside like eccentricity, but from the inside was instead, in my opinion, almost certainly the only available form of survival for a man of that caliber. He was a man who had been performing since 6 years old, since before most people have even entered public school systems, who never had his own childhood, and who had been studied, scrutinized, and analyzed and consumed before he even understood what actually was happening to him or what he was performing for. He was building a place where he could exist out of human gaze for a mere few hours, and was then accused for that. He was put on trial, he was put on years of public humiliation, and the specific sort of cruelty behind watching one of the most gifted performers, one of the most gifted artists of all time, or of his generation at least, being reduced in a public discourse to a punchline or to a predator, depending on which direction the conversation was moving. Any clip taken out of context or even taken in context could be chosen to be formed to the exact way each media outlet wanted it to fit their own narrative, and none of the media coverage touched on any of the work. The work remained, but it completely only touched Michael Jackson as a person itself. He then did die, unfortunately, at the young age of 50 years old. Propofol killed him, and it was a doctor who should have theoretically known better. You know, all those years of schooling, and unfortunately, a little bit of malice goes a very long way in the medical scene. So his body was so physically exhausted from all of the work he had produced, and he was in so much pain that ordinary sleep had become completely impossible for a man like him. So the only solution available to him was anesthetics, and in my opinion that proves the dedication and the amount of effort put into his craft over countless decades of just genuine passion for the work that he produced. And I think that is the very thing that means, or at least induces, the fact that there will never be another Michael Jackson ever, because the conditions that produced him will never also be able to be recreated. The specific and yet the pretty detrimental combination of his childhood abuse, or his childhood being immersed in performance from the mere age of 6, and the specific and the musical environment of Motown, and then also post-Motown soul and funk and pop, and the developing music scene, and even just a specific moment in music history, not human history, my apologies, when the album format, selling physical albums, was at its peak. It was at its best position ever. And the music video was at its dawn. So a genuine, incredible music video such as Thriller imploded with such well acceptance. And it was such a talented project that it was impossible for it not to shake the scale. And then also the specific genius of Quincy Jones at exactly the right time. None of that will ever be available again anymore. Well, ever, in my opinion, actually. And the industry that built him doesn't exist anymore either. The cultural moments that received him have passed, and they will never come back. And I think all of those factors combine, and you can pin it on luck, you can pin it on grace, you can pin it on the universe being fortunate towards him, or you can pin it simply on his talent and his hard work and dedication, none of those will ever be blessed to another human being or another artist or another music creator, in my opinion, ever again. But more than any of that, there will never ever be another Michael Jackson, because what he had was not teachable nor transferable, and it was not reproducible by any sort of sustained effort or ambition or the right team or the right producer. What it was the specific talent of Michael Jackson, completely and irreducibly solely him, and the world consumed it until there was absolutely nothing left.